Okay, and so I'm going to read a important notice regarding planning public art committee meetings or city meetings. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with state of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. YouTube and Zoom are being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be updated uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. PAC members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom, as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the PAC may do so during public comment and may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. YouTube is a viewing only format. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way of providing public comment. Okay, and with that, Margie, if you want to go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Yes, I'm calling meeting to order and do a roll call.
Okay, we have Vice Chair Mills Tyson.
Here.
Committee Member Langberg.
Here.
Committee Member Strucker. Jeff, you're muted.
Jeff?
Here.
Excellent. It's also our mic check. Committee Member Brent.
Yes.
And Committee Member Harris is out of town this week and not available.
Okay, and then we don't have any minutes, is that correct?
Correct.
And is that going to change or is that going to continue like that?
I do want to talk about that as part of our committee structure. And I believe that is, I guess we can talk about that as part of the planning department report.
All right, and then any comments from the public? We have Natalie Tim.
Hi, I just want to watch really basically and listen. I've looked for the minutes online because I like to know what's going on in the arts in Sebastopol. And I don't know what's going on other than at the Sebastopol Center for the Arts that, I get their newsletter. So I'm very interested in public art. I did try out for the committee and I'm looking forward to your meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, welcome. Okay, any other comments from public? All right, any conflict of interest? Okay, consent calendar.
And we don't have any items for that.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the regular agenda items. The other comment?
Thank you, Margie. And so for our first regular agenda item is the introduction of our new member, Robert Brent. And then I do want to go over some meeting logistics as part of that, as orientation for new membership. I did do a meeting with Robert on Tuesday, general orientation, but it's a good time to do a refresher for our newly appointed members, which are Jeff Strucker and Barbara Harris. Joining us for full terms. So congratulations to Barbara for that, and Jeffrey reappointing for another full term.
You're welcome. And I just wanted to clarify, it's Stucker, no R, although I used to get a lot of mail that said
Thank
Strucker,
you.
as well as other forms, unfortunately.
All right. So Robert, if you wanted to take this opportunity to introduce yourself to the committee, a little bit about your background, that would be great.
Okay, I have a fairly extensive background in the arts in Sebastopol. I was the board chair of the Sebastopol Center for the Arts when we remodeled the Veterans Building. I negotiated the lease, helped raise the money, acted as the contractor, and designed most of it. And was on that board for 8 years. And also on the board of Sonoma Land Trust. I was a potter. I'm currently an avocational woodworker. My wife is a jeweler. My children are artists and went to art schools. So art is pretty much what goes on in our family. And this was the third time I had applied to be on this committee, and I'm gratified to have the opportunity. I look forward particularly to working with you all on the sculpture garden, which was a project that I couldn't manage to fund when I was at the Art Center along the border between Ives Park and the Art Center. And insofar as questions of the county's role in the lease and property lines and so on, I'm pretty familiar with all those. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Robert, and welcome. And so just as a refresher regarding meeting logistics, again, I did an orientation on the Brown Act for Robert on Tuesday, and he obviously has, I've asked, since he has quite a bit of experience, to help this group as well. I know some of you aren't as experienced. Just as a reminder for the Brown Act, if you have materials that you'd like to share with the committee that are part of the decision-making tools of this body in terms of moving forward with discussing and improving actions, those do need to go through staff. There's a couple of different options. One, if you send it to me the week before the meeting, I can include it in the published packet so that it's available for the public, consistent with the Brown Act. If it is something that you want to share at the meeting, that is also allowed and does not need to be published. And so, Marty, I know you had something that I'll have available to share my screen for one of our discussion items later this morning. We do have, obviously, there has been some sharing of pictures of the sculpture garden and things like that. Those are not part of the decision making for this body. So those are fine to send to each other. But if you ever have any questions about it, you can always send it to myself as the staff member for this committee and ask me to share with the rest of the committee members. And I can make sure that we're not, as I said, if it's something about a past or a celebration of past events, things like that, those are generally acceptable. But if they are discussion items that are going to come before this body, then they need to come through myself to make sure we act appropriately within state law.
Carrie, just to clarify, when you were mentioning about sending materials for the meeting, are you saying that needs to go through you, or that was okay to send?
No, it is not okay to send meeting materials.
Mm-hmm.
So the Brown Act specifies it is an open meeting law. So it's trying to make sure that everything, it's also called the Sunshine Act, but anything that the board is going to consider and make provide direction or move forward, make decisions on, needs to be available to the public, not just the board members. And so that's where it needs to come through myself as staff, or be shared only in the public meeting format. It can't be sent directly to all of the committee members. That's a Brown Act violation. It's the cartoon is the group of white guys in business suits sitting around a table making decisions in secret, and then coming out and sitting before the public when all the decisions are already made. That's what it's, so this is.
Okay, go ahead.
So if it's something that's on the agenda for the meeting, you can send it directly to me, and you should send it just directly to me. This is why we also have subcommittees when we're doing project work. Like you and Warren had a committee of 2, which is less than the quorum of the committee. And so you are allowed to do work back and forth if it's less than a quorum. But at that point, you can't share it with other members of the committee other than in an open meeting format.
Okay.
So if you recall, when you and Warren were working on the sculpture committee, you two would provide me drafts of the work that you two did together. And then I would share that as part of the meeting documents and agenda packet.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're saying that if within a subcommittee, it is all right to email between members of the subcommittee without going through you?
Correct, but that's only going to be one other member. And you can't then loop in any other members with additional questions or things like that for input, because that constitutes a quorum or a majority of the committee.
Got it. Okay.
And needs to be discussed in an open public setting at that
And then
point.
if someone has material after 1 week that they want everyone else to have for the meeting, how does that?
So
how's
if
that
you
done?
have anything that you want to submit as part of an agenda item for us to share, if you get it to me the Wednesday, end of day before the meeting, so the Wednesday of the last week of the prior month, because I published we have to publish the packets on the meeting materials on Thursday. I'll have it and I'll be able to include it in the packet. So that's the best way to do that.
Right. Okay. So you're saying Wednesday before the meeting by the end of the day. However, if there is anything that someone wants to share after that period and before the next, so from after like Thursday to the meeting Wednesday, how should they do that?
So you will need to send that to me. I will need to determine whether or not we can share it as additional supplemental materials, but because it needs to be posted to the website and we need to make sure that it's not. So the issue is that under the public meeting requirements, we need to post the agenda and meeting materials 72 hours before the meeting. So that's usually the Thursday before, since City Hall isn't open on Fridays. If there are public comments or things like that, then they get posted to the website as so that they're available for all the committee members as well as the general public.
So could someone send something after that Wednesday to you to perhaps then screen share during the meeting? Is that would that be
yes? You could do that if you have if you just simply send it to me, I'll be able to work with you and I can communicate back and forth with the staff in terms of the best way of getting that material out. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions on all that topic? Good.
All right, and so that is our new committee member business for the moment.
And what about getting a email for Robert? So,
yeah, so I will be adding him to the committee email group.
Gary has that now.
Yeah, I have that already. I will send that to the group. We don't want to make that public information out of respect for Robert.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next item, which is election of chair and vice chair. Carrie, would you like to advise us?
So for this item, Vice Chair, you would call for nominations for chair.
Okay, I call for nominations for chair of the Public Arts Committee.
May I ask, Margie, you have been the chair?
No, I have been the vice chair.
And Jeff, this is your second term?
Correct.
And Lars and I are new?
No, I've been here. I'm the liaison from the Design Review Board is my official role. And so I've been here for one term, I think.
And Barbara? Has she been on?
Barbara has been on the Public Art Committee, I believe, for a little less than a year. She filled the vacancy from when Warren Arnold retired. And so she was just reappointed to serve her first full term.
Well, with these kind of committees, it's sort of raise your hand if you're willing, or everybody else will step back, and whoever didn't remember to step back is it.
Well, the way we've done it in the past, Robert, is we have had specific nominations.
Well, are you willing to serve?
Yes,
Jeff, you're willing to serve?
And no, what I was going to do is I was going to nominate Margie Mills Tyson as the outgoing vice chair
Makes sense to me.
because of her seniority or experience and experience as the vice chair to be appointed or elected to the chair.
And it sounds like either you or Lars should be the vice chair.
So Robert, if I may hold you on that, so I guess you can do discussion, but just in terms of the procedure, the way the city does it is we do ask for nominations for the chair, and I apologize, I should explain the whole process before starting this item. And then that would need a second and a vote. And then we would do nominations for vice chair, a second, and then a vote.
Well, I'll nominate Margie as the chair.
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations?
And do you like votes to be recorded through the chat?
No, I actually do roll call votes for the committee. Okay, and so Margie, I don't see any other nominations, so you would then ask me to do a roll call vote.
would you do a roll call vote, please?
Okay, and so this is the motion put forth by Robert Brent and seconded by Lars Langberg is to elect Margie Mills Tyson as chair of the Public Art Committee. Jeff?
Yes.
Lars?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
And Margie?
Yes.
Okay, and so that motion passes 4-0, and Margie is now our chair. And as our chair, Margie, would you call for nominations for vice chair?
Yes. And thank you, everyone. And Jeff, thank you also for the nomination. So now we need nomination for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Jeff as vice chair.
Second.
Any other nominations?
I have a question. Since there's a motion that's been seconded on the floor, and I'm just curious, Lars, how long have you been involved as the liaison or other with the PAC?
I don't remember.
A while.
Not long then.
Like 3 or 4 years, I think.
All right, I was curious. I know you're pretty seasoned and would certainly serve well as a vice chair as well. So.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Given that I'm a vice chair on the design review board, I try and not take on more responsibility. Not that it's a lot of responsibility, but.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, so we'll call for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Margie. Yeah, it sounds like there's no more nominations or discussion, so I'll do a roll vote. And I apologize, but thank you for your patience letting me use your first name. Committee member does not roll off the tongue. Jeff Strucker?
Aye.
Lars Langberg?
Aye.
Robert Brent?
Yes.
And Margie Mills Tyson.
Aye.
Okay, and so that motion passes 4-0, and Jeff Stucker is our new vice chair. Congratulations, Jeff.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for the nominations as well.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda will be the Ives Park Sculpture Garden installation signage opening ceremony and security. And I just want to say, as newly elected chairman, to thank you. And I've said many times in different venues that to me, this is an extraordinarily wonderful committee in terms of the support that we give each other and the respect and the support we give the city and our priority in terms of serving the city rather than necessarily our own ideas. And that I feel we've been very effective. And welcome Robert and encourage him to follow in that vein. And I just want to say, as an example, that when, last meeting we discussed about the opening date, and I wanted it to happen right after the installation, the current installations, and everyone else wanted to wait to the spring. So we took a vote, and I abstained. And I wanted to let the other members know that it took me about an hour after we finished meeting to think about it, and then I went, you know, they were right. And I think, and that to me is an example of how, as a group, we have, you know, the whole is greater than the individual parts. So I wanted to say that. Okay, onward. So the sculpture garden, logistics, installation, signage, opening ceremony, and security. So Carrie, can I reorganize that sequence?
Absolutely. That is the
Okay.
chair's pleasure.
Thank you. So the first thing.
And I have
yes.
the document if you'd like me to share it at any
Oh,
point in
yes.
time as well.
Yes, I did email, mistakenly, of course, email it to the other members, and Robert didn't get it. So, but that's the timeline projection. But I wanted to, before we got to that, Carrie, I wanted to find out what's happening with the signage.
Okay, so I have not finalized the signage yet. With Caro leaving and Noah potentially coming in, I'm trying to do it as one order. It seems like given, and then there was also the complexity of a couple of the entry signs aren't actually that we had discussed on the site with Yamargi. One is actually on Art Center property, the wooden sign at High Street, and the other at the Parkside entry does not meet code the way that we were looking at it. So we do need to look at either a higher sign that meets the height requirements or otherwise. And so I wanted to just discuss that as part of today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. I would like us urgently to get that finalized and ordered. I really feel strongly that not just for the enjoyment and information for the community, but also for the security of the sculpture there, the sculptures there, to give them a context and to increase the consciousness of the community about what this is, and to respect and protect it.
Well, and plus the fact, I think we owe it to the artists to have their
Yes, thank you.
announced to the community, sooner the better.
Yeah, so any way at all to facilitate that happening faster and to complete it as much as possible today, I would like to do that. I've even thought about, making something temporary and to find out, because I got the impression even once it was finalized and then ordered, it would take a while to produce. So perhaps we could also, when we talk about temporary signage. But maybe we should then discuss that further in a few moments. Is that okay with everyone? Lars? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, since so much has happened since the last meeting and the installations and everything, I don't know how much Robert is aware, but there was, and the sculpture being, tipped over and all that. Like, could we do sort of a little recap? Like we put these ones in, we had a big problem. We've got another person that's sort of pending in NOAA. Like this, we have this whole security question, but I don't know if even just to bring Robert up to speed on what's happened so far. Does that
I think
Are
that
there
would be helpful.
Are there not bolts in the foundation so that sculptures can be clamped down in any random configuration that they may need?
Okay, so maybe we should just give you an update so you don't need to go through. Yeah, there are bolts, and the attachment went through different evolutions, even right during installation and immediately after installation. The smaller sculpture, which was marble, was vandalized twice. It was knocked off of the pedestal. The pedestal was knocked off. It was a very heavy one. And the second time the sculpture was injured. Exquisite little sculpture. So the sculptor removed that from the sculpture garden, and it has, it's become very clear that our requirements for materials that make up a sculpture and the way that it is secured need to be adjusted. The three that are there right now have been okay. Two of them are metal. And we have talked with the Art Center about their video security and about working together on having video coverage for the area. Carrie made the comment that that doesn't help identify people. One of the sculptors who lives in the area said that in her perspective, it was actually school children in the elementary and high schools. That was her idea. And that, yes, even though you couldn't see their faces, they could be identified by their body movements and so on, especially at the schools where they attend, if that is the case. So I think that video is one element that is important. I think signage is important, and what they're constructed, how they're constructed and attached. And in terms of discussing further secure attachment, I don't know whether we have time for that today, but we might. And we have also, Robert, discussed possibly, and that's what the timeline was about, and which hopefully we'll put up again, Terry. A second call, since we got initially it's proposal submitted, we had 8 pedestals, we selected 6. One of those was sold. The other one, the artist was not contacted in enough time for him to produce the sculpture. So he said some other time. We've been trying to contact him, but Jeff and Carrie, you have not heard from him either? No. So we've tried a few times to contact him to see if at some point that would work. And then one of the sculptures was withdrawn. So there are now 3 sculptures there, and therefore there are 5 pedestals. One idea for one of the pedestal is to do a sculpture jam-like event at the opening or shortly after, and to possibly use one of what's being produced by that on one of the pedestals. The initial setup was for sculptures to be displayed for a year. So we can discuss, if we do another call, when we would do it. And Carrie, could you actually then screen share that? When we would do it, and how long they would would they finish out the year and so that everything would start again at the same time or otherwise, and when we would do it. So I looked at the calendars and thought about it. We had agreed that we would have the opening in the spring, and we announced that in the newsletter. When I looked at a calendar and weeks so that there would be enough time for people to respond to the call, and then once selected, to be sure that they had their sculpture ready for installation. So trying to give as much time, but not run too far after. It does not look to me that April or May is realistic for an opening. So if you look at the two ends of the chart, there's opening dates in June, early in June. And that's the earliest I could figure it out. I'm certainly, anybody have any other way to look at it, it'd be great. And then when we would get the call out for a second, we have a call, we do need to adjust it in terms of materials and security. So if we got the call out on the 11th, which is soon, if you look going across that bar, when the deadline selection and installation and opening could be, and if the call went out instead of the 11th on either Monday, the 14th or Tuesday, the 15th. I know sometimes Carrie has said that the staff doesn't like to do things on a Monday because it doesn't give them time to process. So that's why I did Monday, Tuesday. And then the deadline, which would give the call either 8 or 9 weeks. And so our next meeting is on April 6th, excuse me. No, yeah, after that, next meeting, after time for people to respond would be in April. And our April meeting is on the 6th. So we could make the selection on the 6th possibly, or another possibility would be a special meeting on the 20th, which is also a Wednesday. And then there's the dates for possible installation, and then the opening June 11 or 18, which is stretching the idea of spring, but at least not beyond June. So that it's touching on background and installation, signage, opening, and security. Comments?
Well, first of all, Margie, I would say thank you for taking the time and burning the brain cells to put this together. My first reflection on it is going with the lower dates, starting on the 15th, Tuesday, with that timeline, and perhaps the middle or lower deadline, and same with the install.
So that suggest either way, since we don't have the next meeting for a month, that means we have to do any revisions to the call today that you mentioned about materials and security have to happen today. And do we have any other strategies about where it's going out to, since we had a certain amount of applicants? Is there a way to somehow expand that?
Well, is the Art Center using their newsletter to promote?
I think we're all a schedule. I think
Yes.
that's good if we can today.
And they're very enthusiastic and supportive.
So might we have a subcommittee of 2 to accomplish this so that there's 2 people to get it done before the next meeting?
We would need 2 people in the subcommittee to get the revisions done and the
Yeah.
additional audience. So it could go out before the next meeting.
Seems like a good idea to me.
Yeah, that's what and then this committee can authorize the subcommittee to finalize the call.
Yeah.
So Jeff and Barbara, just to update you, Robert, have been also working very closely on the sculpture garden and communications.
Perhaps they should be the subcommittee.
That's, yeah, Jeff.
I was just going to say a comment, and I'm not protesting a subcommittee whatsoever. I think that's probably the way it has to go. But in commenting on any modifications to the call, particularly talking about anchoring to the pad, et cetera, I feel like at this point, with a really short upcoming timeline, that the conversations that I had with the artists about anchoring, that it could be handled that way instead of necessarily modifying that in the call. I felt like the communication with the artists was successful enough. And now that we've been through a first installation, we really know what we need to inform the artists about and what flexibility they have if they need to anchor theirs a little more in a more customized fashion for their piece.
Okay, I would say being on site there when they were installed and how that went and what people's perspective was. And I would say we need more than a little more. And I think I agree with you that communication and working with the artist is very crucial to this. And I think the call itself should be very clear about the kinds of needs for installation and for materials.
For what
Yeah.
for what it's worth, when it comes to those installations, I have a very strong background in mechanical engineering, and I would be happy to be delegated to work with sculptors on figuring out ways to customize the installation in order to make it secure.
And thank you. And maybe you could also, we can do it legitimately in a proper manner, input to the subcommittee information that you might have on optimum engineering and anchoring that we could
Well,
put in the call for artists to have that in mind and to know that's a requirement.
Well, if I may, I don't think you need to say anything more than a means of bolting the sculpture down should be integrated into the design of the artwork, and let the artists figure out what they want to do. And then when it comes to installing, look with the city and the artist at how to modify the base, add new bolt holes, weld to bolts, and cut them off later, or whatever method is going to work. But suggesting the actual method probably has too many variables in it.
Yeah, I
no,
agree with that. And
I wasn't thinking of
you know,
actual method. Yeah.
for instance, with Noah's sculpture, which is 13 feet tall, that was the one sculpture that our building department wanted to make sure they were involved with from a structural standpoint to make sure it didn't fall on anybody. Some of the others, they did not have problems with, and it was more the vandal resistant and security was the issue. And so I appreciate Robert's, from a staff perspective, I think that's probably the best way to go.
And Robert, would you be willing to input to the subcommittee on that?
Sure. That's the beauty of retirement. I'm just puttering around my wood shop, so I have all the time in the world.
Great, I'll keep that in mind.
So,
A comment about the subcommittee, which perhaps might be two subcommittees. A subcommittee that is focusing on modifications to the call so that can go out very soon. And then another subcommittee who actually are the people, the PAC members communicating with the artists.
Well, I'm happy to be on that second one, and I would guess that that's also an area where Lars has some expertise, being an architect.
so I think in terms of the subcommittee, I would suggest that I work, and Jeff and I work together. Barbara is not here, and I'm not sure when she'll be back. Or, and I do have some, I have been working on thinking about the second call and so on. And so it seems to me we have the issues of anchor and security, audience, and wording. Is that anybody have any other topics they want put in?
Was a provision made in the base for signage about the artist and the name of the sculpture and so on?
Carrie?
So, yeah, and so we had done some design work, or actually Jen Burtz, our former chair, has done some design work, and the signage on the base is scheduled to be I believe it's 4-inch by 6-inch steel plate, stainless steel, I believe, with printing, laser printing onto it. That would be the artist. What's proposed right now is the artist's name and the sculpture title.
Well,
And that would actually be epoxy to the base in a way that it can be removed, but not, it's just basically glued to the front right corner of the base at the top.
Well, I'd have done it with threaded anchors and the kinds of special screws that nobody has a tool for, but so it's easy to put another one on. If you're going to do it once a year, chipping off epoxy doesn't sound like a great idea to me. But in my conversation yesterday with Carrie about that signage, if I can take a moment, when I was on the Art Center board, I had a dream. Would you like to hear about it? That the Art Center and the parcel, which is now the Sculpture Garden, could have a lot of sculpture and could over time become known as a venue for people who needed to spend their 1% from all over the Bay Area to come and look at sculpture by sculptors they might choose to commission. People like Bruce Johnson and Ned Kahn, and as well as Susandra Spicer and local artists. So this is a place where we could start, and it's up to the artist, of course, whether it wants to be for sale. But it seems to me that the plaque ought to allow the artist, if they choose, to put their website and NFS or available on the sign, so that people looking at the sculpture know that there's a contact and that they could buy it. I see part of our job in supporting art in the city is supporting artists' ability to sell their work.
So Robert, there is a history to this specific sculpture garden and a particular vision that it came from. And the reason why it is called a community sculpture garden. And it, I think that if people want to, we have made it, it's part of the notice that the sculptures, if the artists wish, can be for sale. That's up to them. And if people want, they certainly can get in touch with the city to get information on those artists. It's more of a place for non-commissioned sculpture from the community as an expression of not necessarily professional artists, and not necessarily as a display for other than community expression. And certainly we could invite other people and people who have their 1% to take a look at them. I think that's fine. That'd be great.
If I could just briefly add on to
yeah.
that too,
Thank
for
you.
Robert's benefit. Another one of the items that the PAC has been considering is identifying city-owned spaces or otherwise within the city limits, of course, where other art pieces, whether they're commissioned or other, and whether they're by artists locally or universally could be installed. So that's definitely something we've been talking about. And so I definitely see that as an avenue for some of the artists that you're speaking about.
The more important point to me was facilitating the contact between somebody who might want to buy a sculpture and the artist. If the art is on the city's website with an indication of that, that's a good step. It seems to me that we should let the artist choose whether they want to put a way to connect with them directly on their signage or not.
I was wanting to ask Carrie, in terms of signage, I understand about the entrance signs. In terms of because Jeff mentioned about, acknowledging whose sculptures those are. Is it possible that we could get the signage about the artists that are put on their sculptures ordered now?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
especially now that we know it's certainly those three and they're sustainable.
Do we need
I'll
to
just
vote?
delete out the Carol Pemberton sculpture information from what I already sent over.
Do we need to vote on having you do that?
I don't believe so. The committee had previously approved the signage design. So unless there is a motion to change the signage design for those sculptures, I think that's, I have what I need for that.
Okay, I think it'd be great if we could move ahead and get that installed as soon as possible. Thank you.
So I wanted to just briefly mention that, Robert, appreciate where you're coming from with the financial situation for artists, and I definitely think we should consider that, and perhaps that would be something and that kind of information that could be shared in the opening. Those pieces could be shared by the artists verbally or on paper, however, whatever format they're comfortable with. And then trying to move on, I wanted to ask about the necessity of making a motion to try to vote on one of Margie's proposed timelines.
Yeah, I need comments on those. Jeff, thank you for your input on that.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion then, and then if it's seconded, we could comment on it, have discussion. So I'm going to move that we go ahead with the lower set of timelines on your proposed CSG.
Could you, Carrie, could you please put those back up? Thank you. And I also think
that's
that
getting the proposal out by the 14th or 15th of this month and having the opening on June 18th. Yeah. Are you, is that a motion, Jeff?
I think I'm going to reword it, Robert. So I would move that we go with the lower timeline beginning on February 15th, Tuesday, continuing across the middle, April 15th for the deadline, 9 weeks out. A special meeting on April 20th in order to approve any potential art pieces. Installing June 8th. And a potential opening on Saturday, June 18th.
I'll second that.
And just one note on that. So if the special meeting is on 4/20, I believe we can get it to City Council for council's approval of the sculptures on May 3rd. That's a pretty tight turnaround, but I think because I imagine it will be a consent calendar similar to what it was last time, we could do it that way.
wait, you just said May and that's an April meeting.
So you have your meeting to select the artist April 20th. So I'm suggesting that it would go to City Council for council approval on May 1st.
Got it. Thank you.
Or
Sorry.
May 3rd, their first meeting in May, which is May 3rd.
Thank you. So that sounds good to me. Now I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, it was installed on the 8th. do you think that, do people think about trying to make the opening on the 11th? Is that too soon in terms of, well, we might need extra thises or that's?
Yeah, I definitely think that would be too soon. I just feel like
Okay,
after we went through our first stage here, there are definitely some unforeseens and additional time needed to really do it right.
thank you, Jeff. Okay, so
So
I
leave my second in place here.
So as part of this, are we assigning, or everybody agrees we have a little bit of subcommittee work to do, that we'll just determine that after we vote?
sounds good. Should we call for a vote? Any other discussion before we call for a vote on the dates, timeline?
And just so I'm
Yes.
clear, Jeff, you made the motion? Is Margie, you need to call for a second unless I missed
Robert
that.
seconded. He seconded.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. I missed that. Thank you.
Okay, so Jeff, do a roll vote.
Aye.
Lars,
I-
Robert,
Aye.
and Margie, aye. So it passes. Excellent. So for subcommittee,
So our
why not-
current
yeah,
sculpture, so just a little bit of history, the initial community sculpture garden subcommittee was Warren Arnold and Margie. Warren obviously has retired from the pack. At that point in time, Margie continued as the, I guess, sole member of the subcommittee officially, because most of the work had been done and we were coordinating installation. The installation part of it, because that doesn't require decisions by this body, does not need to be restricted to the subcommittee. And so as we were working out the installation logistics, both Jeff and Barbara Harris volunteered to do coordination with notifying the artists and working with them in terms of installation. I do not believe that would need to be restricted to a subcommittee. It's simply the committee carrying out its already determined and approved actions by the effect of recommending the sculptures and getting the sculptures approved by the city council. The installation part of it is just the hard work of actually implementing the committee's work. So I don't believe that's subject to the Brown Act or needs to be restricted to two people.
so
That said, it is certainly helpful for staff to have specific people to be able to coordinate with and know who's doing what. There was a little, even with just two people, there was a little confusion on who was, and lessons learned in the last round of who was doing what in terms of contacts.
So if I understand you correctly, Carrie, discussion between members for the, excuse me, putting together the call, just that, and putting it out, does not, that could be open and does not
No,
need to be limited?
That does need to be limited to
Okay.
the subcommittee or discussed and determined as the full group. Once you've
Discussed.
issued the call
Yes.
and selected the art, so selecting the art and getting that approved is the final action for the board. The rest of it's just, and selecting which sculpture pads, as you know, we did that in a public meeting as well on the site, publicly noticed that it was going to be at the site. So once you've selected the artists and which pads they are going to go on, that's the final decision in terms of the art pieces. And the remaining steps are the implementation of it, the getting them up and running are simply logistics.
Okay.
And so
like to-
that portion of it, because your decision is already done, is not subject to the Brown Act.
Okay, I'd like us to just get the call out and get the revision. And I'd like to suggest that Jeff and I work on the wording for the call to be put out. And that Jeff and Barbara still be in charge of communications with the artists coming up. And in terms of engineering, that Robert and Lars, in terms of bolting or security and engineering, work on that. And give some input during the next few days to the subcommittee that's doing the wording. So that's my suggestion, so that we can get it out on the 15th. What do you think?
Does that need a vote?
Does the formation of subcommittee need a vote, Carrie?
A subcommittee, yes, should be a motion. I think the rest of it, of just the process stuff, consensus would be fine.
Okay, so that's my proposal then.
Second?
Discussion. Okay, can we take it for a vote? Jeff,
Aye.
Lars,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
Margie, aye. Okay, thank you.
Margie,
Yes,
I have a random but obliquely relevant thing to mention. There is an informal agreement between the city and the Arts Center that insofar as it's possible, the Arts Center waters that lawn and the city mows it. Now, of course, in drought conditions, the watering hasn't happened, but it's the Arts Center that owns and feeds the sprinklers that are there. The city does not have that. And the city has the tractor type mower. And so that seemed like an appropriate arrangement, which both the city and the Arts Center could easily have forgotten in the last 3 years of drought. But the city is aware that they also are going to have to use the weed whackers in order to go up against the bases, and that they think that they're going to maintain that.
so when we were forming the sculpture garden, maintenance was agreed to be taken by the city.
Great.
And in terms of the sprinklers and so on, I think maybe at the next meeting we can see if we need to work that out. I have been in touch with two of the people, well, actually almost three, there's three people who are now at the Arts Center, including during the installation. They were very, very helpful, very positive, and very good. So this is, the project is the Public Arts Committee project, the garden.
Right.
And the city did agree to the maintenance.
Lovely. Perfect.
Yeah, and from a public works standpoint, we've worked all this out with Public Works. They're aware, actually they installed the pads, but they have been mowing the lawn, for however long, just because it's a lot easier, and whoever they're sending out doesn't know where the property line is per se anyway. I think I recall the Public Works superintendent noting that some of the sprinkler lines were defunct. So I'm not quite sure who's doing what, but I think I can check with Dante, our Public Works superintendent, but I believe he said that they had actually extended the city sprinkler lines to cover some additional area of it because the lines from the Public Arts Center are no longer in place. But I can check with him and confirm how that's working. But, we've basically said from a public perspective, it's public property, let's maintain it.
Yeah, if the city is doing it, that's all good. When I found those lines when we built the north patio, I tried to make them usable, and there's a cover plate that can come off to find them, but they've never been turned on since that patio was built, to my knowledge.
So maybe when we come into the dry season, we can take a look at that. In terms of security, the elements that I have down are video, bolting, signage, and police only that it's not really viable. I don't think they're going to increase their rounds. And that when Kara's sculpture was vandalized, she did report it and discuss it with them. And her impression was they were not available really to do much. So besides those three, does anybody have any item to add to security consideration?
Well, the Art Center doesn't have any outside cameras.
Wait,
I'm sorry.
Jeff? Yeah.
The Art Center doesn't have any outside cameras, do they?
Yes, they do.
Oh,
And we have this, we in discussion about that. Yeah. Jeff?
Well, I was just going to suggest that once we get into the discussion of the security more further, we might also consider if we do invest in security cameras somehow, that we consider installing one on one of these city-owned utility poles along the paved walkway. So on the opposite side of the lawn, closer to the creek. So then we would have them on potentially both sides of the sculpture garden.
Okay. Any other things besides video, bolting, signage, and actually sculpture materials? Okay. So I think,
Margie, I think
yes, please.
in terms of the call, I think that security and video surveillance doesn't need to be in the call.
Yeah.
But it is something that certainly we have discussed. I did talk with Public Works about this because I think, you know, they certainly have had vandalism and issues in other parks as well. One of the issues with the security cameras is that usually you can't identify a face, and the police, it's not that they don't want to do anything about it, but unless there's a clear way of identifying someone from a camera, there's not a lot they can do about it. And usually when people are doing things they're not supposed to, they're wearing, you know, hoodies or caps or whatever to obscure, or they're doing it at night when there's not enough visibility for that.
Yeah.
That said, it doesn't necessarily mean that having cameras that won't act as a deterrent.
Right. And if we can also work with the schools for whom the videos might be more of a potent item. And Jeff made I don't know if we're going to bring that up again, Jeff, but putting a little note about saying, you know, something, you are on camera. Jeff, what you wanted to?
Yeah, we could discuss that further, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
I have
Okay.
two more questions in terms of the call, because this is our last full membership meeting before you and I work on that, Margie. So first of all, on the sprinklers, I'm assuming those are overhead sprinklers, and is there any wording in the call or the descriptions about making sure the materials are water resistant? I mean, I would just have some questions about, you know,
Fine. Yeah, we'll put that in. Good.
on the artwork and, you know, damage or rust. I don't know what kind of minerals in the water, et cetera.
Okay, we include that. That's great.
but
The second thing was about in the call, do you remember for the 1 year period of time that the pieces are being asked to remain in the sculpture garden, does it say when that 1 year is supposed to begin?
I don't know. I would assume, and we
Because I
can
was
be
gonna
more
recommend-
specific about it from installation. And what you bring up reminds me that we do need to confirm. So my idea was that the second call, as I mentioned earlier, would be for the remainder of that time rather than another whole year, because then next year we'll actually have to do 2 calls again.
I was going to suggest making the year from the opening.
Ah. Nice.
And then in future calls, you know, I mean, that could be changed, of course, if need be, but
Okay,
Maybe that would work out, put everybody on equal footing in terms of longevity in the sculpture garden.
nice. Robert, yeah.
I don't think we need to worry about the sprinklers since rain is the primary that all sculptors would consider before they put one out there. And sprinkler water is city water, which is clean and chlorinated.
Thank you.
Okay.
So do we need to, okay, so can we just have consent in terms of that the year runs from the opening?
Yeah.
Is that okay with everybody else? Lars? Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Nice. Thank you, Jeff. That was great. Okay, so we do have another discussion coming up. I just want to mention that in terms of Robert's idea about, doing what can be done to support artists and so on, we could at a future time, not at this moment, but consider putting in those little patterns. I forgot the name,
QR code,
what they're called.
a QR code.
Yes, exactly, QR codes. So we could attach that next to the artist, but I don't think we should get into that at this point. Okay. Any other comments on Sculpture Garden? And just a reminder that, let's see, that it's the 15th and Carrie, just to get information from between the three subcommittees. So we need information, just a little bit statement, wordage from the engineering, and we don't need it necessarily with the artist communications, but getting from the engineering from Robert and Lars to Jeff and I.
So the way I would handle that is it would need to go through me.
Okay,
So I would say everyone can send me comments for
okay,
their particular parts.
okay,
And then the subcommittee, the Jeff and Margie subcommittee that's finalizing the call would have that language and be able to finalize that.
thank you.
I
Okay,
was just going to say in
Yes.
regards to that, Margie, that I really feel strongly that we should try to keep that language in the call as simple as possible and as least restrictive as possible for the artists, and that newer language could be added to the call for the future, because I don't see us meeting that timeline if we have to do a lot of back and forth about technicalities around the engineering and stuff like that. So that's my feeling.
okay, I think, Jeff, you and I can talk about that, communicate with that.
And I think Robert already gave the input actually on in terms of what that should say. That there should be a means of securing the art to the base.
Yeah, I just mainly, I am concerned about making clear about a secure both attachment and materials, because some materials that we thought in the old world were just fine actually are at risk. So we
Such
can
as?
discuss that.
Such as,
Marble,
oh,
The marble got pushed over like
it got broken also.
because it got pushed over. No,
Yeah.
We don't know that.
any of them could be vandalized in one way or another. They could be spray painted, right? There's all
Yeah.
sorts of ways. So I don't
Yes.
know that. I
But-
think it's a public art place, right? So the person submitting it has to know it's going to be subject to all sorts of things.
Yeah, and in the old days, which could have been, a few months ago, we had a particular perspective on that. And for instance, the Beth Hartman's sculpture, to me, I'm glad it's fine so far, but it's fiberglass and it seems vulnerable. And it's also not bolted all the way through from the whole sculpture into the cement. And so I think things are changing and we need to, public art, they had the metal one that Sculpture Jan made. They had it just not even bolted on the sidewalk in Occidental, I think. And it was fine, but I don't think that's necessarily what we can expect going forward.
And Margie, I think for the call, there is language about the fact that it's public art and whatnot. It may be
Yes.
that this committee's evaluation, the perspective as you evaluate pieces, may change a little bit in this next round. As a, you know, it's a learning process, and when you're looking at what the materials are as a committee and evaluating which sculptures to recommend, that certainly will play into it.
Yeah, I would have to say, I think one of the risks with Caro's piece was the smaller size. People could really get their bodies on it, put a lot of leverage on it, as opposed to the, you know, almost superhuman size of the other pieces.
So that's another element, yeah.
Yeah.
To be, okay. So I think we can work that out.
I think,
Yeah.
I think Harry makes a good point. We don't want to restrict what we see. You know, if somebody thinks their sculpture is appropriate for a public spot like that, let them send it in, and then we get to evaluate it.
Mhm.
Okay. Just, you know, what people think is appropriate, they, again, they may not be thinking about current time. It was very distressing to have that happen.
Yeah, no question.
Okay, so can we go to the next item? Okay. Discussion of subcommittees and non-PAC member participation in subcommittees, and Natalie appropriately is here. And then we need to have time for the planning department report update.
And I can be fairly brief on that, but just one piece of background for item 6D, the PAC subcommittees and members of the public who are not part of the committee participating. I think we had so in the past, City Council has mentioned this as a potential for those who are interested in the Public Art Committee through application or other interests that they might express. The city does have a climate action subcommittee. It's a subcommittee of council, but it's a group of 14, I believe, 12 or 14 people. The planning department staffs that committee as well. They are the first committee to do this, where they have or one of the first committees where it's a standing committee, just like the PAC. But they have a number of working groups, which is what they call their subcommittees, rather than a subcommittee of a subcommittee. Which does include non-CAC, Climate Action Committee members. It's working quite well for them. And so there's a good precedent for that. Right now, we obviously have the committees for the sculpture garden that we just talked about. And so this was an item that I believe Margie had requested be on the agenda, but I did want to provide that background.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I want to speak to that because the city council in their interviews, again, brought up, essentially each council member brought up a question or an interest for the PAC. Some of those things being participation in local schools, in some kind of potential art display or something like that within city limits, consideration of paintings, and also something Robert already spoke to a bit, is artists getting financed and or paid. Those were three of the main questions or ideas that council members brought up from my memory.
I think that this.
Do you have any,
Yeah, go ahead.
do you have any clarification on paintings?
No.
Like visual art, like paintings or murals, or
I didn't feel like they were that specific about it. I felt like this council member was coming from a place of, you know, the PAC considering all forms of art, including that medium.
Okay.
I want to say that the city council, their enthusiasm and support is just wonderful for art. And they're just they got lots of ideas. And every meeting that there's communication, there's more ideas, and
Mhm.
it's great. And I think, I don't think we can do them all. And I
No.
do think we need to consider how many projects this committee wants to be involved with at any time.
Yeah,
As we get to, just what we're doing now, it's a lot to really focus on and do well. So, and the whole way that we could do more things if we had working groups and so on, I think we need to discuss it and try to do it in a way that's as good as possible.
And just to, if we want to add on to a potential list, this is obviously trailing on to what your comments were about. We just have a list for discussion. And part of me in the interview wanted to remind the city council that we meet once a month, and we're volunteers. So we're doing the best we can, and definitely taking a lot of positive steps in terms of art in Sebastopol. But another potential subcommittee could be around, adding to current surveys about vacant available city sites for potential art installations in the future. And potential, and Carrie, you might want to speak to this in a future meeting, but signage, the whole body of signage piece.
yeah.
Oh, right. Yes. Signage.
Um,
Yeah.
It would also at some future time be interesting to me to have a subcommittee polling commercial building owners about the availability of muraling walls and talking to folks like ArtStart about increasing the artistic muraling around town.
Yeah. Robert, ArtStart is something that I have on my list. I just think it'd be wonderful to connect and somehow coordinate with them. It's just
And
terrific.
on that same point, Robert, the outgoing chair, Jen Verts, was kind of active in that area too. And she did volunteer to come back to help us out in that area if we needed it.
That'd be a great outside person to be on a subcommittee about muraling.
And so there's also other groups that have come and talked to us about our participation in some way with their wonderful ideas and projects, including the recycle group and the group that wants to do something around the Ives Pool.
I guess that when we think of like paintings, for me, when that came up, like there's public places that are interior, right?
Yes.
So whether we do that or someone else does, but we can do, could we be involved in sort of more gallery type shows at the whatever, at City Hall or the library, et cetera.
Right. And we
Well-
talked about pop-up shows.
Yeah, there are people who like Satri Penchak and Greer Upton who do curation as hired gun curators who do things like that. I know when Dan Smith was funding the hospital, Greer was the curator of all the art in the hospital. So there are people who like to do that, and some coordination of that through the Art Center, who of course are already in touch with virtually all the artists in the area is potentially beneficial, but curating interior spaces is definitely doable.
So this is very rich. And do people want to get any more specific about how we want to structure and work with what Carrie called working groups, non-members? I mean, all these ideas, we can go on for a while. A few millennia. So what do people want to do around this non-members help?
I think it's a great idea, and as a board member at the Land Trust, we do that on certain committees that, for instance, the audit committee uses outside members who can help with that kind of thing. So there's plenty of precedent in the nonprofit and even governmental world about doing that. Carrie, my question about that is, if we have 2 members of this committee on a subcommittee and we add a third person who is not a member of this committee, how does that affect the Brown Act?
Good question.
It does not affect the Brown Act because you're simply inviting additional members of the public in, but the Brown Act is specific to the quorum and the number of decision makers.
So we could have
Act as
3
the decision
outside
maker.
people and
Absolutely.
a committee of 5, and we could circulate whatever materials and so on, as long as there were not more than 2 members of this committee involved in that group email.
So maybe we could, I don't know, make a proposal to authorize subcommittees to involve others in helping the work of that subcommittee. And here's another question. Before someone joins as a working group, does the rest of the Public Arts Committee need to approve that? So because it's a reflection also on the committee and it's an extension of the whole committee's functioning and work.
I would think so.
Okay, so how about I make a proposal, and I'd like to hear from.
But a
Lars
motion.
and Jen- A motion.
If you're doing a
Thank you.
motion.
A motion that we authorize subcommittees members to include others to help with the work of that subcommittee, subject to approval by the whole committee.
I'll second that.
What do you think? Yeah, Lars, Jeff?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Jeff?
Well, I don't have any comments on it at this point, but we have a second in motion anyway, so
Right, so it'd be discussion on the motion and then a vote.
So Jeff, any discussion on the motion?
no.
Okay, so we'll take a vote.
I have a discussion.
Do we? hear-
So a public comment?
Do we hear?
No, you do offer public comment on items on the.
that? Okay,
agenda.
great. Natalie?
Hi. So so does that mean that you have to meet before the person can join the subcommittee?
Yeah,
That's my question.
yes. It would.
The question was what? Do we have to meet the person?
Do we have to meet as a group before someone can be part of the working group and join it? And we just said that we did want the group to be able to acknowledge and
True.
vote on
Yeah.
the extension of the work of the committee. Yes, so the answer to your question is yes.
Yes.
But since
Okay.
we meet every month, that's really not a difficult hurdle.
Yeah. Okay. She's somewhere else. Okay.
Forgot her camera's on.
All right, so you're welcome. Okay, let's vote. Jeff,
Aye.
Lars,
Aye.
Robert,
Aye.
Margie, aye. Okay, good work.
All
We
right.
have 5 minutes for the planning department report.
Thank you, Margie. I will keep it brief to a couple items. The Upcycle Art Project, which has come, that's a zero waste subcommittee, climate action committee art project, that has come to this committee a couple times previously for assistance and advice, have just released a press release. I would like to, I will send it to all of the members of this committee. And if you could help with getting that out to any art organizations that you know of, I know the city has already sent it to the Sebastopol Center for the Arts, but if there are other art organizations, art departments, we're trying to get the word out about this community art project. So if you could send your contacts, I would appreciate that. And then just so you all know, that project has begun. The other item that I think would be near and dear to this committee's heart is that as you know, the sculpture garden at Ives Park is part of the Ives Park master plan that was adopted by council in 2013. We are, as a city, working on a project this year with the Planning Commission, which is also our Parks Commission, to look at naturalizing Calder Creek through the park, getting rid of a bunch of the fencing and getting rid of a bunch of the Sac Creek line channel and bringing it back to a more natural state. The Planning Commission reviewed some options in December, and it went to council last night. And after a few hours of discussion, I'm happy to share the preferred option. It's on my screen. It was option B if you read the papers or were looking on the planning department website for park planning. So this is right now the creek is in a straight culvert through the redwood trees and then through meanders through the portion of the park. One of the interesting things about it that you'll see, obviously, it maintains the dashed line here is the property line approximately between the Art Center and the city parcel. So that remains basically the same. But as you might see on this other side, there are opportunities in the scheme for sculpture paths on the other side, closer to the creek of where the trail is once that. So this is, several years out. This is a long range. This is a concept we're working on right now as a city. But if funded and implemented, would provide some additional integration of art into the park. So we'll be working with the Planning Commission and the consultant to develop that option further. And I will certainly let this group know when it goes back to the Planning Commission and City Council for presentation of that option, should you want to attend it and or comment. And then the other thing I did want to note, there were questions about the minutes. As most of you know who've been around a while, our admin staff has been out on leave since August. That was the person who prepared the minutes for this group. And so we are a bit behind on minutes, and I apologize to this group. I did have a question because one of the ways that we had already determined this group was going to go to action minutes and not the full 20 pages worth of discussion, since we have the videos readily available for anyone who misses the meeting and wants to hear verbatim. I did have a question of whether this group would be interested, and we can agendize next meeting perhaps, having one of the committee members track the action items. This is how our climate action committee works. They track, if there's a motion and whether or not it passes or fails, those types of things. And that would help us as a city get out those minutes a bit faster. I do have a contract person who's working on the backlog of minutes for the various groups, and she's slowly catching up, but it would help us catch up a little bit more quickly with this group. So something for the board to consider.
Okay, so do you need to hear back now? We are at 12 o'clock, so.
Yeah, I think we're at our end time, so I'll just leave it at that for now, and perhaps we can agendize that on our next meeting. I would like to get any other, or I should say any other suggestion for agenda items for next meeting. If you could get them to myself and Margie, then I'll work with Margie in terms of setting the agenda for next meeting.
Any updates on NetCon?
We do actually have the contract finalized for the soil testing that needs to be done. The city is actually taking that over from Ned because of some complications there in the contracting. So we will have that done in the relatively near future. That has been taken a few months. It's, you guys get to do the fun part of selecting the art. Staff has to do all of the contract and insurance provisions, or as we saw last round, the Caltrans permitting, which can be a lot of the work of implementation, which is, as we've discussed previously, why the use of subcommittees and having the committee do the work for some of the smaller projects is really helpful.
And the other thing,
But that's where that project is. So that is moving forward. And I know Michael McGinnis is almost done with his fabrication, and he has gone into the library to do some of the final measurements and whatnot for the for how it will be secured to the building. So that project is also moving forward.
thank you. And I just remembered that we did not go into the signage for the entrances for the,
Okay, Margie, can we table that to next time since our
Yes,
meeting?
for
We'll put that on the next
Yes.
agenda.
okay.
Great.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second? Thank you. Jeff, any, oh, aye. Aye.
Well, it doesn't matter what we say now.
Well, we have to watch out. We have to do it right. Okay, thank you
Thanks.
and welcome, Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
It was
we'll
lovely.
get the call out by the 15th and we'll work together.
that's
Okay.
great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Marty. In touch.